I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I am Chuck Jubin.
And, if you're watching this, thank you, because it could just be the two of us. So thank you to you and thank you to me. But Chuck, you and I have been talking about quality, particularly, but not limited to, in relation to online and digital education for, I'm serious, at least 20 years now. And I know that mainly because I defended a dissertation that you directed 20 years ago, and we were talking about it then. What's up with that?
Well, indeed. And actually, Calvin, I think it has been longer than that because, we were there at the beginning, and I think we were edging up on the quality conversation in our lives very, very early, long before you undertook your dissertation. I think somehow our karma is that we've always been interested in quality. What is it? Where is it? How is it? Where is it? What effect does it have? And I think we're both committed to the fact that we know it's real. It's just that we can't put our finger on it. And we have been fingering quality for these many, many years, Calvin, and perhaps we can nudge each other closer to whatever that ethereal thing quality is. We know it's important. We know deep in our hearts it is extremely important, and we're committed to it. So I appreciate you trying to help me clarify my thinking, because I fear it's getting more and more muddled.
Yeah, well, I relate to that. And I think we're undertaking this series of conversations and doing so on camera to be at least metaphorically in search of a finish line. Now, I say metaphorically because I don't think that there's not a finish line. I don't think you get to an end, but to bring some focus and to bring, some sort of structuring and some sort of direction and maybe inviting other people in to the conversation. So, we'll make this shareable. Other people watch or listen and have the ability to leave comments behind or reach out. And, we foster dialogue, we move forward together, and maybe we'll pick up on some themes that we want to do something with in some other way. So we're going to try to very, very lightly structure these conversations. So I want to offer, Chuck, to you and I today, this sort of jumping off point focal question, if that's all right. Why should we care about quality in online and digital education in 2025? Like you mentioned, we've been talking about this for a long time. Well, surely we're done by now. Right? Why should we care about quality in online and digital education in particular in 2025? What would you say?
Well, Calvin, that's very interesting to me. When you talked about the finish line, I'm always reminded of a wonderful quote by the Welsh poet Gwyn, who said, "The beauty is in the walking. It's the destinations that betray us." And perhaps we can view this conversation precisely as what you said, as an invitation to people around the world for a broader conversation about this notion of quality. And I will just talk, you and I have been in this digital learning business for a long time, and God knows how we ever got in it, but we're here. And one of the papers that really had an impact in the blended learning environment was a paper by Oliver and Trigwell, who said, and it basically was entitled, "Can Blended Learning Be Saved?" And the underlying tenet of the paper was blended learning is really a non-tractable construct because there's not a real functional definition. I think that's wrong-headed. I think there are so many things in our life that are so important that do not have a precise definition, that are completely observer dependent. Happiness, pain, emotion, we all know they exist, but they exist probably the way Combs and Snygg talked about it in terms of the perceptions of the individual. And a lot of times this notion of quality, I think, has that characteristic. We would love to be able to settle on this is quality, that is a quality thing, this is not a quality thing. I'm not sure that that's possible, but I
Mhm.
think this is playing in the background. And I think this conversation might help us both, and I hope others to join us in this conversation and help us deal with this, because both you and I have been beat up in this digital area by the notion of what we were doing in the early days was not quality.
Mhm.
We both experienced that, and we
Mhm.
had to be defensive in many ways. We
Mhm.
tried to be proactive, but we had to respond to a lot of criticism about what we were doing in terms of online learning and blended learning and what we were doing. And I mean, you and I both experienced that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, Chuck. So much there, as always, to respond to and interact with. But one thing I think is a thread that I'll pull is, like you said, hey, in the early days, in our former shared institutional context, we were beat up on quality. And having left that context and you and I both get around to other contexts periodically,
Right.
I mean, it strikes me as that is not just the past for a lot of context, right? This question of quality, it bubbles up. I interact with colleagues and I hear underlying sometimes when I'm speaking with people that there is still a an assumption of less than when it comes to online, blended, digital, anything. There's like a uh, there's something that must be proven. Like even as I engage around like conversations about quality assurance, sometimes I find people are positive about it because, well, sure, because online needs some help.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think it's
Right.
just the past. I mean, do you run across that when you interact in other contexts?
Well, I think there's that subtext that is continually running um, in terms of, well, this is great. It gives me an opportunity to get an education. I don't have to uproot my life. It
Mm,
responds to my lifestyle. I mean, the world has changed, jobs are changing. So this is a great opportunity, but there is that underlying subtext is all of the good things that I experience in this, I'm willing to give up something. And that something maybe it's floating around this notion of quality. I mean, the expediency of what we do may impact it, and we have just completed a study which we published, Kelvin, that students on the UCF campus who respond to end of course ratings, which are high stakes at UCF. I'm not sure about Louisville.
mhm,
However, we have determined that 65% of them simply bypass it by straight lining it, by
mhm,
simply taking the same response to every item on the courses and basically bypassing the system and ignoring it, therefore opting out of the conversation about
mhm,
an instructor and how they interacted with them. And we find it's terribly unfair
mm,
because it's high stakes for our faculty in terms of
mhm,
promotion, raises, the judgment about the quality of their teaching. And when students don't respond to them, it really does lessen the conversation. And I approached our provost, Mike Johnson, about this and said, Mike, what do you want to do about this? And he said, as an institution, we're going to own it. It's a problem, and we have to address how we can integrate the student voice into higher education. So I
mhm,
think out of some problems are going to come some very wonderful solutions. I don't know what they are, just like
mhm.
this conversation, Calvin. I don't know where it's going, but I still have hope. I still have hope, and I often wonder: is quality simply existential? Is it a process? And does it defy a definition? I don't want to believe that, and I don't think you do, because you did Legion work here at UCF. trying to put metrics on the notion of quality. And your residual work still endures at UCF in terms of certification of online courses, in terms of level of quality, right? And you did all that work.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think just to hit some notes from what you said, I said, why should we care about quality in online and digital education in 2025? And part of what you touched on was, well, quality's problematic. What's that? And you touched on both inputs related to quality and outputs related to quality. Like there are things that we associate with results. Like you gave the example of end of term evaluations. That's just one teeny tiny slice. You talked about the effort still in place at UCF around some kind of standards for online course design, the certifications, that's input. So there's inputs and outputs, but the we, we is complicated. Like who is we? And there's students and there's faculty and there's other related folks, stakeholders, administrators, the public, all kinds of different people, whether they want to use those words or not, I think are concerned with quality. But, we maybe can't leave our very first recorded conversation on this topic because I can't believe it's taken this long for somebody to bring it up. For almost as long as I've known you, Chuck, not all the way back to the beginning, but pretty close, I almost couldn't have a conversation without hearing you cite Robert Pirsig. So we can't leave our first conversation without invoking Robert Pirsig. So why is that?
Well, Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance for me was a transformational experience when it is a complete treatise on the notion of quality. And it is built around that, and it is a book that both Gardner, Campbell, and I read every 2 years in terms of going back to the notion of that. And he wrestles with this notion, and in subsequent work published by his daughter, wrestles with the notion of quality from the notion of dynamic quality, which is constantly changing, constantly evolving, very existential, cannot be measured, cannot have metrics placed upon it, versus static quality, which does relate to metrics. And that was his notion. And his quote that has always resonated with me is, I can't give you a definition of quality, but everybody knows what it is. And that goes back to Justice Potter and all of that kind of thing. Well, if that is true, perhaps you and I are spitting in the wind, Kelvin. If it is that ethereal and that elusive, perhaps this conversation will lead nowhere. But I don't believe that. I believe I believe what you just said. There are some key points to this. There are some key, and I don't know if I want to use the term indicators. But I don't know if I want to use that term, but there is something there. And I very much resonate with your notion of we are obsessed with the output. We know very little about the input into this notion of quality. And I think the same thing is true with large language models, generative artificial intelligence. I think we're absolutely obsessed with the output. I think very few people understand what's going on under the hood, and I think that is critical to this kind of thing. When I have students this day with the power of technology come into my office and say, can you quickly, in 5 minutes, explain to me what an eigenvalue is? The answer is no, I cannot. Right? And why is the answer to that? Because you have none of the intellectual underpinning to understand the notion of that. I can't do it. There's no way you can do it. And that's sort of an issue with this. But we're back to this notion of quality. where do we go with this? Where do we go with, maybe we should be talking about inputs and outputs. I don't know.
Mhm.
Is that too structured for this?
No,
This is
I
this is a
I
great
think
conversation,
it's
Cal.
useful. I think it's useful. And I don't know, maybe one of the last things I'll say is, I've used this example some. I might have shared it with you before. I don't remember, Chuck, but when I go to a new place, I'm usually on the lookout for an exceptional cup of coffee. And if I hear that there's a good coffee place somewhere, I'll uh, I'll try it out. What's going to be lost? $5, whatever. But what I've learned experientially over time is gauging whether I'm in the right place or not, right? Like somebody told me maybe. And so I go and I kind of look around and I kind of see what are they offering? And do they roast the coffee there themselves, or has it been locally roasted, from a partner recently? Can I get a pour over that they're going to like grind the coffee right then for me and make it for me? Or and if so, that's a good indication. Uh, but maybe not. Sometimes it's just batch brew. They've already got a thing and they're just going to hit the little tap. And I'm like, eh.
Yeah,
But sometimes if they've got like a roaster right next door, I'm like, okay, they're serious about their coffee. So that's sort of the thought process and the
yeah,
observations I've learned to pay attention to is, are they serious about coffee? If they're serious about coffee, it's usually going to result in something that I'm going to enjoy when it's put in my cup. And I'm just a give me the plain black coffee kind of guy. I just want it to be an exceptional cup of coffee. So there are these little things that I've paid attention to. They don't always line up. It's not like check, 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 check. But if I see some of them and speaking of like eigenvalues and factor analysis, and I don't even know what those words mean, Chuck, but they start clustering together a little bit, and I go, huh, there's something there. It may
yeah,
not be precise, but there's something there, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's instructive. What do you think?
Oh, wow, that's so interesting to me because I've forgotten your not obsession, your love for your love for quality coffee,
Yeah,
and your perennial search
that's right.
for for the Ark of the Covenant,
That's right.
in the coffee cup. Um, uh, that is so interesting. Well, I had this experience in Costa Rica, Rosa Finca Blanca, which is a coffee plantation, and I did a tour of it. And you could see the love
Mm,
for coffee. You could
mhm,
feel the love for coffee there.
mhm.
And at the end, we sampled coffee, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
And then they went through and they defined all of the notes in the
Uh-huh.
coffee,
Uh-huh.
you know, and there were hundreds of them,
Oh yeah,
and the
right.
list went on forever. And it somehow, Kelvin, it wasn't, here are the metrics of coffee. It was it was the love of coffee that was
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. Yeah.
fragrances, the flowers, that
Yeah.
whatever's embedded in the coffee.
Yeah.
It was just marvelous. And maybe in this invitation, when we're inviting people over the world, only if you're serious about quality.
That's right. That's
If
that's right.
it's a passing fancy,
Yeah, you wanna keep going.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
You're not gonna you're
yeah.
not you're gonna get impatient with us really,
But
really, really
but
quickly.
but the underlying theme of Pirsig's work is quality underpins everything in life.
Mm,
If you teach, if you work, if you fix your motorcycle, if you raise your son, whatever you do, quality is the underlying construct that drives a meaningful life. And I believe that. You know,
mhm.
we're teachers, Calvin, we're teachers. Never once have I gone into the classroom and said, I'm going to do a terrible job. Every time I walked in, I said, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to do my best to make this the class of all time. Doesn't always turn out that way. Nobody wants to do a terrible job teaching. Nobody. I can't believe it. Maybe there's some outliers. I don't know. But you know what I'm saying, Kelvin, in terms of we all want to do the best kind of thing. And and it's so interesting to me that you mentioned factor analysis and eigenvalues and all of the things in which I was trained. Chester Harris, the man who trained me at the University of Wisconsin, was terrifying because he knew what I knew, he knew what I didn't know, and he knew what I was capable of knowing. I was always completely transparent to Chet. There's no way. It was terrifying. It was terrifying. But as C.S. Lewis said, you learn by God, you learn, in terms of doing. And Chet said something interesting to me one day walking down Bascom Hill when I'd graduated. He said, Chuck, and his picture's right on the wall. And I always look at it, lest I think I'm too smart. There's reality. Sorry, Mr. Harrison. He said, Chuck, you get old and you don't know anything anymore. And I said, oh, no, Chet, no, we're smart. It wasn't a literal comment. It was a metaphor. It was a metaphor for the fact that what was so relevant to me in the 60s in terms of statistics and psychometrics is not nearly as relevant today because we have moved on. We have moved past it. And perhaps that's what we're doing in this conversation. You and I are trying to find out where we are, Calvin, where have we come from? And excuse me, responding to Noble and his digital diploma mill narrative to where are we now with the notion of quality. That's what I would love to explore with you as we go down this road. And the more I talk to you, the more excited I get about it.
Well, I always enjoy talking to you, Chuck. I never leave a conversation without like at least 5 things to look up and figure out what they are, and and that's stimulating. But I think maybe we should be looking for the exit, and I think maybe by way of maybe not exactly summation, but just to put a semicolon in the conversation, we're never really done considering quality, but we do hope to get to a more practical pausing point for consideration in these conversations at some point in order to help guide practice in practical ways in higher education generally and in particular with regard to what we call digital education. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, that's yeah. Let's consider this a worldwide invitation, Calvin. It's um uh and perhaps we can maybe quality is a malleable kind of thing for the notion of I always like Berliner's paper about the levels of expertise in teaching and the notion of that when you're a novice you want context-free rules.
Yep.
Just tell me about quality. I want to know about quality. Give me the 5 things that make up
That's
quality
right.
and
That's
then I'll
right.
know about it versus
That's
the
right.
expert who no longer thinks about quality. It just happens,
Yeah.
and it's maybe we're on some, I don't know. There's a lot to think about in this initial conversation.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next one already.
As
And
am
if you're
I.
watching this, hey, come back and join the next one. Reach out. We'd love to talk to you. Wherever we post this, there's probably like a comment section. We'll
That'd be
try to
great.
throw in some links maybe if we find one or two. But hey, Google works, and you
Absolutely.
can go look up something for yourself. But we'd love to hear from you,
We would,
Chuck.
we
Until
would
next
indeed.
time,
Oh,
maybe we'll stop here, huh?
we'll stop there. One last thing though. If you do respond to us, we will guarantee that we will respond. If you, yeah, we absolutely guaranteed, and we would appreciate any comments,
That's true. That's
All right.
true.
All
That's
right,
true. Well,
Calvin,
maybe we'll just say bye for now.
bye for now.
Bye for now.